So it would be an amiss of me if we don't talk about OPS when discussing public finances. So we know that many opposition parties are going back to the OPS, and even in Maharashtra, the BJP government and Mr. Shinde's Shiv Sena-led government said they are not negative about OPS. So my first question is, why are the states going back to OPS?
Vritti, first let us understand what is this OPS business, because not every viewer may be familiar with this jargon. India is the only large country, I want to emphasize this, India is the only large country in the world which has unfunded, open-ended, index-linked, long-term legal liability of pensions to government employees, and only to government employees. How many are there in government out of the total workforce? Roughly about 3 to 4% of the total workforce of India is in government. 90% of the workforce, 90% plus, is in an unorganized sector, not only private, unorganized, without a monthly secure wage. They are leading lives of great desperation, eking a precarious livelihood. Elsewhere in the world, pension, when they talk of pension, they talk about all the workers. In America, 97.6% of the people get pension. That means all people practically, a small number of unorganized workers don't get it. So is the case with Western Europe and advanced countries. So the word pensions in those countries is different from pensions here. In India, pensions basically means the government employees are on a pedestal. Same work somebody else does. After all, if all of us don't do work, who is producing food in India? Who is giving us this bottle, this watch, this telephone, these glasses, this paper? It is the ordinary workers of India. These workers, there is no security. There is no future. But government employees, because they happen to be in government with a colonial mindset, they are put on a pedestal. They are not only paid higher wages than the market and average, but unfunded, long-term, legally mandated, index-linked liability. Index-linked means the pension keeps on mounting. There are people who retired with 10,000 rupee salary, they get 50,000 rupee pension. Now, this is the backdrop. And that's taking away the large share of the cake. Vajpayee government understood that this is not sustainable. I'll tell you how it's not sustainable. In some states, some good work was done. A thorough study was done. In Andhra Pradesh, for instance, they found that the pension burden now is 16%. If you embrace the old pension scheme of the kind that was prevalent until 2004, which now some of the sections of the employees are demanding, some states are now yielding to that, it would be 39% of the revenues of the state, of the total revenues, including Government of India transfers. Today, the salaries and pensions, they constitute 74% of the state's own revenues in Andhra Pradesh. It would be straightaway 129% of the state's own revenue, salaries and pensions alone. That means state's taxes are not enough to meet even salaries and pensions if OPS is embraced. The burden will not be felt tomorrow. The burden will be felt from 2035 onwards. I'll come to that later. The debt today, Andhra Pradesh debt of the state is, as opposed to the 20% norm for the states, is now already 38% plus. It will become, over time, over decades, 211% of the GSTP. That means double the state's total income will be the debt with the old pension scheme. The fiscal deficit, that means the amount of money you're borrowing every year, is 3% or thereabout today of the GDP or GSTP of the state. It will mount to 11%, only because of old pension scheme. But this burden is borne by the whole state. It will collapse. Every state will collapse, I guarantee you. Some states a little sooner, some states a little later, depending on the current status, that's all. But this collapse is going to happen 15 years later, probably from 2035, 36 or something. Now, we live in a world where life does not exist beyond 10 minutes. In social media, they say beyond 10 seconds. People get bored if you and I answer a question for more than 30 seconds or something. Therefore, we are not able to anticipate our children's future. Now, my generation is a passing generation. For you, you may think 15 years is a long time. I can assure you, it goes off in a jiffy. By the time you realize, I'm sorry to tell you that, at this young age, you will be suddenly in your 30s. That's the way life is. Even now, in my mind, I can imagine that I was just 24-year-old young officer who joined government. I was a decision I said at 30, etc. But the truth is about more than 42 years have elapsed since then. So that's how life moves. So while 15 years appears very distant future today, it's not that distant, it's real, it's imminent. Now, what is the new pension scheme or national pension system? Vajpayee government understood this danger. We must really be grateful to him. He was, I think, 80-year-old man at that time. So he had no future personally, but he genuinely cared for the future generation. This is the hallmark of great leadership. That you don't do something for today, but you actually think of 20 years, 30 years, and well after your passing. And he quietly brought all the states and all parties together and came up with a national pension system. What is national pension system? It is a funded pension. That is the key. Defined contribution. The employer and the employee, in this case the government, makes a contribution today. So whatever you will be spending 20 years, 30 years later, you are not simply making a declaration and a law today and leaving it to next generation's tax money. You are actually providing for it in a fund today. That is what all countries do, except India. So he brought India to the mainstream. That whatever pension you pay, it's up to the government and the budgetary constraints. But whatever you're going to pay, you're providing for it today, putting away in a fund, you don't touch it, and pension is drawn from there. That is the way the rest of the world operates. And that is the only way if we care for our children. All the politicians who want their votes and who want to win 1% vote today, they're terrified that they will lose 1%, they will lose the election in our first past the post system. I plead with them. Would you do it to your children? Would you burden your children with a decision that would cost them crores and crores of rupees that they cannot afford because you want to enjoy something at perks of office today? If you don't do it to your own children, how can you do it to the children of India or children of Maharashtra? Maharashtra has not yet done it. I hope it will not do it. But because you mentioned Maharashtra, I'm mentioning, but other states have started doing it already. Punjab, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, West Bengal never entered this stream. And sadly, you can actually see a correlation between a state's fiscal profligacy, that means the finances are in a bad way, and the reckless decision of the old pension system. I'll give you numbers. You take, for instance, I have some data here. Take, for instance, some of the states that are embracing the old pension system. Punjab already is spending only on salaries and pensions and interest. This is committed expenditure which you cannot control, you cannot reduce. Already is spending 168% of its own revenues even now. Even now. And if you take the total revenues including Government of India transfers, Punjab is at 83%. Rajasthan, 134% of their own revenues. And from Government of India transfers we include 75%, 74%. Chhattisgarh, 115% of own revenues. West Bengal, 174% of own revenues. So already they are in a deep crisis. And recklessly for short-term political benefit. And what is the benefit? The 1 or 2% employees' votes may matter in a first-past-the-post system.